Everyone's saying thumbs up, doing great.
Okay, is everybody online now?
Jasmine is saying we have breakout groups in Zoom that we've set up. And Jasmine is saying we still have a few to show up. A few more.
Okay.
I think Kyla and Renz is missing, Jasmine is saying.
So did you all have a chance to practice with each other or not yet?
So Shaq saying yes, we met with our group. And we met at 1 o'clock, so we'll be doing some more practice today and tomorrow. Okay. Sorry, and Marvin saying, yeah, we have some internet problems here. It's continually freezing. The screen is frozen. Ray saying, but I think we're all good. Meng is asking, am I group 1? Who's first in presenting? And Shaq is saying, Renz and Kyla haven't arrived yet, so we'll figure it out when they are in the room. Meng is saying, but the PowerPoint, I still need to include some more pictures in my presentation. I think the host is Jasmine. She can open up the file. Ray is saying, oh, cute kid.
Mm. Okay, so we're still waiting for 2 other people to come, 3 other people?
So Yami is saying Peebs and Renz are the only 2 left. And this is Bay, the interpreter speaking. Perhaps also Ember hasn't joined yet, and Miss Techi. Will Miss Techi join? Let me just, I can't see everybody. Jasmine is saying no, I'm not sure if Miss Techi will join us.
Okay. Now I've got all of you up. Before I was just seeing a few of you, so now I have all of you up. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8, right? Yeah, not including Christian and the interpreters.
Yeah, so 10. Jasmine is saying we still have to wait for Renz.
Okay.
Yami is saying yes, in total there's 10. So it's just Renz that is missing, Jasmine is saying. And Shaq is saying, I'm going to text Renz to see what's up. Jasmine is saying, what about Kyla?
Kyla's down here. There she is.
So it's just Renz that's missing. He's having some technical problems with his computer. It's freezing up. We'll just wait for him in 1 minute. And that was Shaq.
Okay, did anybody have any questions about the presentation so far?
Meng is saying no questions.
Okay.
Rick is saying no. Okay.
Okay, so you divided into two groups before?
We have 3 groups actually.
Okay. Okay, so who was in the first group?
So Shaq is saying Yami, Meng, and maybe you put your hands up in the air. Who's the first group? Hands up in the air. Okay, there you go.
Okay, and second group?
So there you go. So we have Nathaniel as well, Shaq and Patrick.
Okay,
And
and
yeah,
third,
Nathaniel.
third group?
So Kyla, Renz, and Marvin.
Okay, so let's go with everybody from the first group is here, right?
Yes, we're all here.
Now, do you want more time to practice this among yourselves before you present, or you want to present now?
We need more practice, Kyla is saying.
Okay.
Just give us around 20 minutes, Jasmine is saying.
Okay, why don't we say 30 minutes or 25 minutes, and then we'll start at 1:30 with the presentations.
Okay, and then there's just a discussion on the practice, the breakout groups. Okay. 2:30, sir, 2:45? 30 minutes?
Yeah, sorry. My time is 1 o'clock now. Your time is 2 o'clock. Sorry, yes, 30 minutes.
So we'll be back at
2:30 or 2:35, yeah. 2:35 is fine.
Yeah, okay, 2:35.
Okay, all right, so go to it with your practice. Are we all back?
Carla's saying, I think so.
Okay. All right, so how about group 1? You want to make a short presentation? You can have one person or you can take turns. Okay,
So we'll just take turns from 1 to 3,
okay,
and we also have PowerPoints that we want to present. Is that okay?
okay, okay, sure.
So will we have an interpreter for this?
Yes, yes,
Voice? Okay. So do I begin now? Okay. This is
yes,
Meng speaking.
yes.
All right. Okay, Yami's saying ready,
Okay,
and we're just figuring out who's interpreting. Bay's interpreting. Okay. Sorry, my screen's freezing up a little bit. Yami's saying. Is everybody okay with my signing? Is it still frozen? It's frozen on my end. Yeah, I can't see everyone else, but okay, I'll just sign away. I'll just go ahead and start. So today we're going to present to you the introduction to deaf histories. And something that you should take note as we go along in this presentation is that you will notice that the sentences are colored. The light blue or the blue colored represents the establishment of schools. The dark blue is the number of teachers. And this will be indicated by a percentage. So in comparison to hearing people, you will see a percentage of deaf people during that time. Number 3. This will focus on oralism and other forms of sign communication. Number 4. And this is the establishment of various deaf organizations in addition to the World Federation of the Deaf. And this could also apply to government-run organizations. Number 5. This is the development of sign linguistics and deaf studies. This is highlighted in violet. So from 1 to 4, as you can see, and number 5 includes general topics, whereas number 6 is a short overview of the history. And this might include the Philippines as well, how the natural sign in FSL has developed before the colonialism of other countries. So we will also do a comparative study of the Philippines and Vietnam, and how FSL has influenced both their native languages. Ray? Hi, this is Ray. From 1754 to 1778, we will focus on, right now, 1754, remember? With Ape de l'Epée. and this is his name sign. Lepe established the first deaf school in France. And he used methodical French sign. As you can see in the statement highlighted in blue is the establishment of the school, and the red represents the mode of communication. So that again is related to the theme that Yami mentioned with the colors. So I just wanted to remind you, blue is the establishment of schools and red is for the communication method. So Lepe learned French Sign Language from two deaf girls. He was actually there to participate in a presentation. Okay. So Lepe was not the first to establish French Sign Language. Lepe was actually walking along one day when he noticed two deaf girls signing to each other. Lepe was observing these girls and their signing and eventually followed them home. Once they arrived at their house, Lepe asked the parents if he could learn sign language from those two deaf girls. They were 12 years old. So he wanted to learn to gain vocabulary, words like pencil, paper, various gloss words. He learned from these two girls.
Yes.
Once he learned sign language, Lepe applied French grammar to the visual language. Okay? In 1754 to 1778, again, the year. So Thomas Braidwood established the first sorry. He established the first public school for deaf people in Britain. He spoke English, just English. And you can see the picture, the school he established in London, which was the first public school for the deaf. Okay. So Samuel Heineke, we'll just call him SH, established the first school for deaf people in Germany. This is Meng speaking, by the way. Before, the mode of communication was sign language, but eventually it was changed to oralism. There was a lot of debate on the sign communication of instruction for deaf students at that time. This is a picture of Samuel. So now, Yami, please take it over. This is Yami speaking. So Heineke, you know who he's about, who he is. And as you can see that the establishment of these deaf schools were very close in terms of timeline. In France, it was first established, and then Germany, and then Britain. So it wasn't Lepe who was responsible for establishing all these schools. You can see that there were many players. Okay.
So I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Woody.
So what was the second school?
So the second school, it was a deaf school. Sorry, let me look at this. No, sorry, Meng saying, no, that was a mistake. It was first established in Britain, Yami.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
second
Second
school?
was Britain.
Okay, so it was in London rather. Sorry, it was in Britain. Sorry. Sorry,
Okay.
that was my mistake. I typed it wrong, Meng is saying. Sorry, I got confused with the color yellow there as well. Yami saying. So my question is, one moment. Okay, so why is it that in yellow you can see it highlighted as histories, plural? Why do you think that is? Any question, any response? Kyla? Renz, anybody? Peeps? What do you think? Why is it histories, plural? Why not just history? So we'll go to uh, Nathaniel. So Nathaniel saying histories is highlighted because deaf history did not just happen in one place. It happened with Lepe, with Braidwood in Britain, and Heineke in Germany. So you can see that the timelines intersect, but it didn't happen in one place. There are also other different schools that have been established in different countries, and that's, thank you. Okay, great. Yami speaking. Meng, did you want to take over? Meng saying, I think Marvin wanted to uh, comment. Sorry, go back to Marvin. Oh, sorry, Meng speaking. Meng. Okay, this is Meng. So 1816 to 1855, Mason Cogswell, who was a doctor, had a daughter named Alice, who was born deaf. She became sick at an early age and became deaf, and decided to call it to contact Gallaudet to establish the school. Okay. So this is a statue in memory of and recognition of how Cogswell helped to establish that deaf school. Jasmine, take it over. This is Jasmine. So as you can see, the two pictures, the portraits of Gallaudet. This is the name sign. He went on a voyage to Britain so that he can, and the reason why is because they spoke English there. They, because he spoke English as well. So he went to Britain to talk to Braidwood. He went there for a visit. He didn't feel successful, however. Gallaudet went to London and by chance saw a poster that had a deaf French speaker that was presenting. He was curious and attended that presentation. Where they had a interpreter, Roche Ambrose Sicard, and also two deaf educators. Gallaudet was very intrigued on their method of instruction, so he introduced himself to them. The two deaf teachers was Jean Marceau and Leclerc. Jean was the first deaf teacher in France, and Leclerc was his student prior. So, master and his student, who both became educators of the deaf. Next. Gallaudet tried to convince Leclerc to go back to the Americas, but he was very trepid, partly because of the difference in culture. If you can imagine you living all your life in the Philippines and going to another country, it's a very difficult decision. So it took some convincing for him to go to the United States. He would miss his family, there would be a different culture, but eventually he accepted the proposition and he left. They went on a boat. During that time, they exchanged, communication, and they wanted to set up a school with Gallaudet using French Sign Language. Gallaudet set up the first school. with Leclerc as the first deaf teacher. But they used French Sign Language. Next. So as you can see, the experience of the deaf teacher, Leclerc specifically, and what he went through, the transition from France to the US. So this picture is Gallaudet and Leclerc. So remember, they were on the boat together. He asked Leclerc if he would prefer to marry a hearing person or a deaf. And during that time, Leclerc replied, hearing, because of their ability to interpret for him. As he became a teacher, eventually he married a deaf woman who was his student at that time. Great, thank you so much.
Okay, excuse me. Okay, excuse me. Great presentation for all of you. Just one question for Jasmine. So, Sicard interpreted for Claire and Monsieur, for the two deaf teachers. But what was his real job at the French school?
Wasn't he a teacher? Didn't he also
Yes,
teach?
he was a teacher. He was actually the principal of the school for the deaf.
So
yes.
He was the interpreter and the principal of the school.
Yes, yes. So he took
okay.
Gallaudet. He took he took Lepay's place as principal and teacher.
I see. Okay, that's clear. Okay, great. Thank
just
you.
Just wanted to comment on that. Yeah. Okay, good. All of you, good presentation so far. Yes, Ray.
So Lepay was the principal originally, and then eventually gave the responsibility to Sicard. That I just wanted to clarify.
Yes, yes. As far as I know, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so that's group one. Group one finished with the presentation.
Yes, we're done. Min saying, Ray saying thank you,
Okay.
Jasmine saying thank you so much.
Okay. So
Yes,
how did you,
yeah.
I mean, it's nice that you were also able to include some additional information. New pictures. Okay, so how do you feel about your presentation?
Yami saying I felt excited. Jasmine saying I also felt excited because I was learning something new. Ray saying, honestly, at the College of St. Benilde, we had this presentation where the interpreter was signing, and it was exhausting to understand them. But with Zoom, it seems like a better system. And it's great that we're able to record the information so that we can save and review. So we have Christian as our host. He's archiving the presentation so that we can understand the step-by-step process, and we're able to actually see the interpreter again for a second time so that we can have a better understanding. At the College of St. Benilde, when we were at the room in person, honestly, my eyes were about to fall out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think we're able to take more breaks here. Not really breaks, but change the activities. It's not just lecture. So I think maybe it will work out well. I hope so. Okay, so congratulations. Okay, let's look at, well, okay, let me ask you now. It's 2:07. 2:07. So should we give the interpreters a break and give you a break on your eyes? Sorry, sorry, it's 3:07 your time.
Yes. In the morning, I reviewed the information about Lepe and the history and you know, the differences of hearing and deaf perspective, right? And then how, sorry, the interpreter is just clarifying. Yeah, so in the past, they highlighted deaf people, and now, like, you know, with Lepe being deaf, and now it's changed where it was hearing people that took control over deaf education. Was the reason being is that it was a deaf person that established the school, and why they focused more on deaf, you know, being educators, as opposed to now how hearing schools or hearing people make the decisions because they're the ones who established the school? That's Meng's question.
Okay, so I mean, I understand the question, but I need the context of the question. When you said first about deaf people, what can you give me more explanation about? So deaf people set up the school, you mean, or deaf people taught you history before? I'm not sure what you meant.
Maybe we can ask Meng to repeat the question again, or her whole.
Yeah.
Okay. So from my understanding, Leclerc, who is deaf and also a teacher, you know, growing up with French, also went to establish the school at Gallaudet, right? So again, he's deaf. But now I realized that Lepe and also Thomas Braidwood were also deaf individuals that helped establish the school.
No, they're hearing.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Interpreter error that we're hearing that established the school. So does this have an effect on deaf history? How, you know, if it was a deaf person who established versus a hearing person?
Yeah. I mean, it certainly has an effect because deaf people have, in general, a different perspective on deafness than hearing people do. But as we say, or as we said, Claire was deaf in the sense that he couldn't hear. He was culturally deaf in the sense that he used signing. But his ideas were not so different from some of the deaf people, from some of the hearing people. For example, you know, at first he wanted to marry a hearing person. And there's nothing wrong with deaf and hearing people marrying. It's fine. But if a deaf person says, I want to marry a hearing person, maybe their perceptions of deafness is not so positive. I need a hearing person to help me. I don't know what Claire thought. I don't know. We don't know. But in general, most deaf people want to be together with other deaf people because they share something. Two deaf people share something that a hearing and a deaf person doesn't share. Okay? Another thing about Claire is, this is a little bit later. In 1855, a deaf man, John Flournoy, proposed having a deaf state controlled by deaf people. You know, people, government being deaf, okay? But Claire thought that was a stupid idea because hearing people accepted deaf people. But in fact, in general, most hearing people don't accept deaf people as equal. So even some of the deaf people in deaf history, from the modern perspective, look like they kind of think like a hearing person. Okay, so what we need to do is to look at both hearing people and deaf people in deaf education as to what they really think. And we can't criticize people from today's ideas looking back 200, 300 years, but we have to say that the attitudes at that time were different. Now, the fact is that many deaf people may have had an idea that they weren't equal to hearing people in the past. Sometimes because of religion, you know, for example, in the Christian Bible, the one in the New Testament, the one example of a deaf person is Jesus makes the deaf person hearing. Okay, and that is not a very positive image of deaf people. Okay, I'm not criticizing the Bible. I'm not criticizing Christianity, but you know, the idea is that the Bible was written by hearing people, maybe inspired by God, but still hearing people with hearing ideas. So therefore, deaf people were handicapped, had to be cured in the Bible. Whereas now we don't think that deaf people need to be cured. Deaf people are normal, they're fine as they are, okay? So, you know, a lot of times deaf people have told me that you get angry. At least these are American deaf people. They get angry when they go to a deaf person's funeral and the priest or the minister said, oh, now this person is in heaven and they can hear Jesus. And that kind of thing, you know, why do deaf people have to be hearing if they go to heaven? If deaf people want to be hearing, that's okay. But if God knows English and God knows Russian and God knows Spanish, certainly God can know Filipino Sign Language, okay? So, you know, these ideas are deeply ingrained. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that we have to reject everything, but we have to see that the perspective of hearing people has influenced many different things. So what I want you to do is think about this from a deaf perspective, from your own perspective. How do you feel about this? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but the idea is that deaf people started to react, I think, strongly to hearing people when hearing people are trying to use technology to make deaf people like a hearing person. For example, oralism, hearing aids, cochlear implants. All of these are ways to change a deaf person into something like a hearing person, instead of asking deaf people what they want. Okay? So if I ask all of you, how many of you wear hearing aids all the time? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to be sarcastic now. Hearing aids are supposed to help you. You should be wearing them. Right? This is a hearing perspective. Okay, so this is, you'll see this more as time goes on. So for example, when Bell invented the telephone, worked on teaching speech, people thought, oh, deaf people can be exactly like hearing people. Okay. But maybe deaf people don't want to be like hearing people. Okay. The choice is not hearing people, not to make the choice for deaf people, but to give deaf people the choice of what they want. I think Ray had a question there.
Sorry, can we have an interpreter sub? Sorry, interpreter sub.
Say again?
Interpreter substitute, remember?
Okay, okay, yeah, sorry. Sorry, okay. So should we take a break now or should we continue?
Meng is saying, let's take a break.
Yeah, I think everybody's eyes need a rest. Okay, but Ming, did I answer your question before? Yeah.
Meng saying, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, let's break for, it's now 3:20 your time. Let's come back at 3:30.
So Woody, this is the interpreter speaking.
Yes.
I talked to Peebs and we have an idea that perhaps we can extend the break to 15 minutes so that we can feedback the interpreters if they need to change up their strategy.
That's fine.
So that's fine.
That's fine.
Okay.
So 3:35. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Rest.
Sir Woody, I think Renz has a question.
Who has a question?
Renz.
Okay. Okay.
About Lahert. Lahert. I missed that. Are you talking about the state?
Mhm.
Why, if they have that perspective long time ago, why is it right now in Gallaudet University they are not that strong? They are still not equal.
Actually, Claire didn't like the idea of a deaf state.
Honestly, I'm very confused.
Okay,
I'm very confused. I think HERC, the HERC support deaf state.
no, 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 no.
It's Gallaudet you're praising.
Claire did not support a deaf state.
The deaf state meaning the state owns by the deaf and it's separate from the hearing people.
No, no. The deaf,
Yes, sir.
Go
That
ahead,
was
Sir
the
Woody.
question.
okay. The deaf state, deaf and hearing people could live together. But the government, the people who control the decisions are only deaf. So who could own the land? Only deaf people could own the land. But hearing people could rent. So a deaf state doesn't mean hearing people cannot live in the state. It just means deaf people will make the decisions.
I think Yami is asking a question.
Mhm.
Like,
They're figuring out what the name sign is. It this or the sideburn or is
It's
it?
with an U hand shape.
Because I've seen it signed this way,
Which way?
like a sideburn, like this way.
No. I don't know. I've never seen it signed that way.
Okay.
Okay. The reason for the sign is when Claire was very young, he fell into a fire and burned himself in this area here.
That because of the, what do you call this?
Sideburns.
Signs, yeah, signs do change.
Yeah, I was trying to think about the reason why his name sign was like that, and
Yeah.
I assumed it was the sideburn, but now I know since it was an accident, he fell into the fire. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And the sideburns cover the scar. So his hair was down. His hair came down to cover the scar.
Yeah, he covered
Yeah.
it.
And you know, all signs, including name signs, change. Does anybody know the sign for Stokey? S-T-O-K-O-E. S-T-O-K-O-E.
Is it like this? Like this, somewhere on the head, or and it eventually
Yeah,
changed to
it's on the top of the head.
Yami saying, "Is it like this?"
Well, actually, it's become like this. So something like this or something like this. But originally, it started as this. And the reason for that was that Stokey had his hair combed in the Caesar style, which it had little bangs. Okay, but this is kind of difficult to do. So a lot of people now are doing it like this. It has no relation at all to the original meaning. Or like my sign in, what's my sign? Woody's sign name.
Yami saying like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, but actually,
now
if
with
you,
a W.
yeah, if you go to Cambodia, you'll find a lot of people signing it this way, way down here. So, you know, different signs change over time. So it's possible if people don't know the origin of the name sign, like with Claire, they may change it to talk about sideburns instead of the fact that he had a scar there. So actually, I have a new name sign in Hawaii. Because of this. So, you know, different signs change over time. Okay, that answer your question, Yami?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, so shall we continue now? Okay, does anyone, well, actually, I have a question. We have two choices now. Group number 2 and group number 3 can then give their presentation, and then I'll start lecturing. Or your second choice is I will lecture, and then group 2 and group 3 will give their presentations on Tuesday. So which do you want?
Tuesday. Hi, sir. Okay, we can have the lecture. I think we'll do the presentation on Tuesday.
Okay. Is that everybody agree to that?
Yes. Shak is saying yes. Carla saying yes.
Okay, all right. So group 2 and group 3 will present on Tuesday. We'll give you more time to prepare also. Okay. All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint. And I sent you a new PowerPoint. Did you all receive that with new slides? Old slide and new slide?
Jasmine saying I didn't get it. One moment, let me check. Patrick is saying I just emailed you during class and also put it in the chat box so you can open.
I can screen share if necessary. Okay, so, okay, let's go to slide number 26. Deebs, are you going to 26 now? Yeah, 26. 26. Yes, okay. So I'm going to review a little bit, make sure you understand. So John Flournoy, who was deaf, proposed the deaf state in the Oklahoma territories. He felt that deaf people were not being treated equally with hearing people. And there's a journal, a magazine called the American Annals of the Deaf, ANNALS. American Annals, ANNALS. And there was a debate, deaf people writing back and forth between 1855 and 1858. Okay, so next slide, 27. Okay, here's a picture of John Flournoy and a map of the US. The Oakland, yeah, you can click the full PowerPoint. Okay, the big state in the bottom, whoops. Okay, back to 27. Okay, the big state in the bottom in yellow is TX. That's Texas. Now, as we know, it used to be part of Mexico, and Deaf Smith helped make Texas independent. Okay, and then in the orange, smaller orange state above Texas is Oklahoma. At that time, only Indians were living in Oklahoma, American Indians. So Flournoy thought it would be a good idea, be a completely new state. Okay, at any rate, many high-level deaf people did not support the idea of a deaf state. So for example, Claire did not support the idea. Okay, let's go to the next slide. 1857, Amos Kendall, who was the business manager in the Telegraph, wrote T.H. Gallaudet to ask about coming to Washington, D.C. to open a new institution. T.H. Gallaudet said he was too old and suggested his son, E.M. Gallaudet. So Kendall wrote E.M. Gallaudet, and E.M. Gallaudet was only 21 at the time, only 21 years old. So he felt he needed his mother, Sophia Fowler, Sophia Fowler, to come with him. So that's what happened. And at that time, the number of teachers of deaf people who are deaf is going up. It's gone up to 41% now. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And here on the left, you see Sophia Fowler, the mother of E.M. Gallaudet, and Amos Kendall in the center, who was the worked in the Telegraph, and a picture of young E.M. Gallaudet on the right-hand side. And the school, oops, go back up. Okay, so also this building is called Kendall Hall, and the whole Gallaudet campus is called Kendall Green. So again, Kendall donated all of this land and money, probably because of his contact with Samuel Morse's wife, who was deaf. Okay. Okay. So this is the first school for the deaf in Washington, D.C. All right. Later, this school starts offering college degrees and becomes Gallaudet University. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, here you see some deaf people, famous deaf people, writing about the deaf state. And Claire said that Flournoy's proposal was like the child of a mind that was crazy. Fifth order. Okay. Deaf people were respected by hearing people, and deaf people were equal to hearing people. So there's no need for a deaf state. And some other famous deaf people like Edmund Booth, who was a newspaper editor, B-O-O-T-H, who was deaf, and John Carlin, who was a very famous deaf artist, did not support the idea of a deaf state. It said, hearing people like deaf people, they treat us equally. In fact, as you will see, this is not really true. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, on the left is a picture of Edmund Booth, the newspaper editor, and on the right is a picture of John Carlin, the artist. Okay, these were very famous deaf people, but they felt that deaf and hearing people were equal. So who wants to grow a beard like these people? long time ago when I was in my 30s, I used to have a beard like that. But not anymore. Okay, let's go to the next, okay, before we go to the next slide, remember Edwin Booth, the one on the left, as you're looking at him. His son made it against the law, illegal, to use sign language. Okay, we'll talk about that in 1919. Okay, all right, let's go to the next slide. Okay. Now, remember that the Columbia Institution was the school that E.M. Gallaudet founded in Washington, D.C. in 1857. So in 1864, the U.S. government allows the Columbia Institution to give college degrees, university degrees, BA. This is the first time in the world's history that there is university education for deaf people. Okay, now in go back up. Okay, 1865, the Columbia Institution was divided into two parts. The Columbia Institution, which was the elementary and high school, and the National Deaf Mute College. Okay, that was the first name of Gallaudet University, was National Deaf Mute College. Okay. So while now we think that deaf mute is not a very nice word, at that time, excuse me, both deaf and hearing people use that term. Okay, let's go back, go to the next slide. Okay, Abraham Lincoln is on the left, Amos Kendall is in the center, and E.M. Gallaudet is on the right. And these, excuse me, these are the first buildings in Gallaudet University that you see. Okay. Now, it's interesting, as we said, that Lincoln basically signed into law April 4th, 1864. Gallaudet on April 4th celebrates its anniversary. And so if someone gets a BA, bachelor, or an MA, master's degree, or PhD degree from Gallaudet now, who signs the diploma? Yeah, the diploma. Rent?
Ren just saying the president?
Yes, the President of the United States signs the graduating diplomas from people graduating from Gallaudet University. So unfortunately, this year, Trump signs the diplomas. So, yes. Rent.
Renz wants to make a comment.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the president signs for that school, and Lincoln was actually a big supporter of the deaf. Uh, Eventually, he was assassinated. Someone shot him, and there was a corporation within that university that commemorated that. Sorry, one moment. So again, Lincoln signed the diplomas for Gallaudet University. Eventually, Lincoln was assassinated. Mhm. And he was the one who helped push.
No, the help.
Sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Techi.
Even after the death of Lincoln, um, the support for Gallaudet continued. And
Yes.
yes, and however, Renz mentioned something about the corporation. I think there's a misconception. Did the death of Lincoln as a president stop? I mean, when Lincoln died, the role of the president in supporting the Gallaudet University did not stop with the death of Lincoln, right? So
No.
it continued.
It
The support
continued.
continued. So it's the
Even
job of the
today,
government to continue supporting, not the corporation,
yes,
right? Yeah.
yes. Even when I started working at Gallaudet in 1969, my didn't say Gallaudet. They said U.S. government checks. So the U.S. government every year gives Gallaudet money for its support. This is interesting because now there used to be two universities. Both in Washington, D.C., that got government support. And that was Gallaudet University and Howard University, Howard, Howard University. That's a college for Black people, the first college in the US for Black people. They were established about the same time, and basically now Howard is a completely private institution, but Gallaudet gets its money mostly from the federal government, and now they write their own check. So anyone working for Gallaudet now, it's a Gallaudet University check. But when I started, it was a U.S. government check.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I have U.S. government retirement. And anyone who works at Gallaudet still can get U.S. government retirement. You contribute money from your paycheck, and then you're just like a government employee.
Okay.
Yeah, I was teasing about Trump because some presidents everybody like to sign their diploma. Some presidents, not everyone likes to sign.
Yeah, unfortunate for the.
Yeah. Well, you know, Trump is giving all of his announcements about COVID. How? Spoken English, no sign language interpreter. Okay, and the National Association of the Deaf is now suing President Trump because he doesn't use a sign language interpreter. So Anyway, different people. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Oh, just going back to Lincoln, he was assassinated less than a year after he signed the documents. Hold on a second, I can probably check to see. Well, I'll check later and I'll tell you next week. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now, from 1817, school that Gallaudet set up and Clare set up, all the schools in the US, and there were many at this time, each state had its own residential school. All of the states taught American Sign Language and written English. There was no oral programs. But in 1867, so 50 years after the first school was established, there were 2 oral schools set up in the US. The Lexington School for the Deaf in New York and Clarke School, C-L-A-R-K-E, School for the Deaf. I don't know the sign for the Lexington School, but the sign for the Clarke School is this. So the C represents the mouth, and of course the C, and the finger represents the tongue going back and forth in the mouth. Okay. All right. So not very good ideas in the deaf community about the oral schools. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, around the same time, there was a man called Melville Bell, M-E-L-V-I-L-L-E, Bell. He was from Canada. He came to the US and he promoted teaching speech. Okay. And he basically said that deaf people didn't need sign language. He was married to a deaf woman, an oral deaf woman. Okay. They had several children. One of the children they had was named A.G. Bell. A.G. Bell. He's the man who invented the telephone. Why did he invent the telephone?
Kyla has her hand up.
Okay.
Because A.G. Bell's wife was deaf. And they communicated using oral, and I think the phone, this was back a long time ago. So he wanted all deaf people to not use sign language and just speak, be oral.
Yes, more or less. But he invented the telephone because he was trying to get deaf people to speak better. Okay. His wife was deaf. Actually, A.G. Bell's mother and wife were deaf. Okay. E.M. Gallaudet's mother was deaf, but his wife was hearing. E.M. Gallaudet's wife was hearing. So, but E.M. Gallaudet supported sign language. A.G. Bell did not. However, it's important for you to know, many people think A.G. Bell didn't sign, could not sign. But in fact, he could sign, and he was a good signer for a hearing person. But he just didn't think that deaf people needed sign language. Especially with the technology of the telephone and hearing aids. Okay, so obviously A.G. Bell thought it was okay for deaf and hearing people to marry. But A.G. Bell did not want deaf people to marry each other. Because he thought it would create more deaf people. But not necessarily true. Okay, for example, A.G. Bell did his research in Martha's Vineyard. And of course, as you remember, in one place in Martha's Vineyard, 1 out of every 4 people were deaf. Okay, so A.G. Bell thought if enough deaf people married, everybody in the whole world would become deaf. Okay. He was wrong. Okay, in recessive deafness, which is the kind on Martha's Vineyard where both parents have to have the gene, only 1 in 4 people are deaf. It cannot be higher than that, but we didn't know enough about, Bell didn't know enough about genetics at the time. Okay.
We'll do an
Now,
can we do an interpreter switch?
yes, okay.
I'm just gonna add something.
Yeah, okay. So E.M. Gallaudet, okay for deaf people to marry hearing people. Did E.M. Gallaudet remember, or did E.M. Gallaudet think it was a good idea if people marry each other? This is Gallaudet.
Sorry, Amber, you're muted.
Say again?
Amber, you're on mute.
Is it Nathaniel? Yes, okay. Nathaniel said, Nathaniel, can you sign again? I think in the history, the deaf are allowed to marry. That's why they are more deaf are born.
Okay, the question is whether deaf people should marry other deaf people.
I think Renz is, I'm sorry. Sorry, I think I thought
Rents,
he
you're
was,
correct. Gallaudet, E.M. Gallaudet thought that deaf people should not marry other deaf people because then they will have deaf children. He was wrong, like A.G. Bell was wrong. So most Americans will say, oh yes, most American deaf people will say, yes, 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 A.G. Bell didn't want deaf people to marry each other, but Gallaudet said it was okay. That's not true. Gallaudet, in one place, agreed with Bell that deaf people should not marry each other. So if there's nothing wrong with deaf people, why shouldn't they marry each other? This is a whole idea in the deaf education system that's something wrong with being deaf. And this comes mostly from the hearing people. Okay, now each university has a seal. It's like a symbol or a logo. And universities sometimes will have writing around the outside of the seal. Okay. What does the seal of Gallaudet University say on it?
People are saying, I don't know, I don't know. Renz is saying, I don't know. PJ is saying, I don't know.
Okay. In the Bible, when Jesus cures the deaf man, he says in Greek, let it be opened, meaning let the ears be open. Okay, and the Greek word, I'll look it up before the next class, I think is EPHPHETA. And that is on the seal of Gallaudet University. So the idea of make deaf people hearing. So again, this is what hearing people have set up as the norm, that there's something wrong with deaf people. And I mean, Gallaudet University is the world's only liberal arts college for deaf people, but it has a saying on the seal saying, let deaf people be hearing. That's better. So how many of the deaf people here want to be hearing?
Renz is raising his hand. I think he's just joking though.
Joking though, yes. Okay. So it's fine to be deaf, and this is what deaf education has not really recognized over the years.
before when I was a kid, Renz is signing before when I was a kid. That was before.
Yeah,
It was before when I was a
right,
kid.
right. Okay. So 1867, 1868, things start to change in the US. Oralism becomes promoted, but there's still 42% of teachers of deaf people were deaf themselves. Okay. how are we doing with the interpreters and with everybody for break? You want another quick break or you want to continue?
Keep going. Nathaniel saying, let's keep continuing. Oh, wait. Nathaniel saying, let's go for a quick bathroom break. Renz is saying back. I think we're just waiting for Jasmine. Okay.
Okay. All right, let's pull up the PowerPoint again. Peeps, can you do that? Oops. I got to sign in here. Okay, now I'm okay. Oops. All right. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is Melville wife and his wife, Eliza Grace Simons, Symonds. She was deaf. And I was going to send you a picture, but because I don't know if it's under copyright, I didn't send it. But maybe we'll show it on Tuesday. It shows Melville Bell and his wife and a little girl. And his wife has a tube up to her ear, and the little girl is speaking into the tube. So this was an early form of hearing aid. Okay, so very oral. Okay, now in 1871, the son, A.G. Bell, moves to the US and really promotes oralism. In 1872, he opens a speech school for teachers of the deaf in Boston. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Here's a picture of A.G. Bell and his wife, who's deaf. And on the right, you see a picture of A.G. Bell and Helen Keller. Do you know who Helen Keller is? Yeah, deafblind. So A.G. Bell is communicating with her in fingerspelling or signing. Okay. So the number of deaf teachers now, because of oral education, starts to go down from 42% to 34%. Okay. Now in 1878, there was the first International Congress of the Deaf meeting. You all know about the 1880 conference in Milan, right? Milan, Italy.
Marvin is saying something. Oh, Pibbs. Yes, they said Pibbs said yes.
Okay, well, that was the second conference, second international conference. The first international congress was held in Paris. And everybody at the Congress was hearing, 27 hearing people. And they say that preference should be given to how to speak words and to lip reading. Now, if this is a Congress about deaf people, why are there no deaf people present? Okay, because hearing people think they know what's best for deaf people. Okay. Okay, also in 1878, the first deaf school in Asia opened in Kyoto, southern Japan. Okay, where do you think the second school for the deaf in Asia opened?
Japan. Yes, Japan. Yami said Japan.
Well, Japan was the first school. So what country was the second school?
Philippines. Speed said Philippines.
No.
Nathaniel said, I don't know what's that. Sorry. Arens. Second.
In Asia. In Asia.
Africa. Ren said Africa.
No, Asia. In Asia.
Patrick said Thailand. Yami said
Patrick-
Philippines.
Patrick is
No,
saying
Philippines.
China.
China, sorry.
Not
Patrick says
China. Not China.
Yami said, Yami. Philippines.
No, not Philippines.
Renz or Nathaniel?
Either one.
Japan, second is Cambodia.
Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Vietnam. Yes, the second one was in Vietnam. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So 1880, the Second Congress of the Deaf meets in Milan, Italy. 164 people. How many deaf? One. 163 hearing and one deaf. And the method of articulation, speech, should have preference. Oh, go back. Have preference to that in signs. The vote was 158 hearing people to 6 saying that sign language was important. 5 of the 6 were hearing and the 1 deaf person. As a result of this conference, people around the world stopped hiring deaf teachers and stopped using sign language. Okay. In France, at the time before this, in the early 1800s, about half of the teachers for the deaf in France were France themselves. After this conference in 1880, by 1900, how many deaf teachers do you think there were in France?
Ren said it's 6%. 6%.
Zero. Zero. All of the deaf teachers were fired in France. And from 1900 to 1975, there were no deaf teachers in France. So this is a really big change. When I went to France in 1975, I talked with some deaf students. In signing. And as you know, American Sign Language and French Sign Language are somewhat similar. So I said, you know, I work at a college for deaf people. And they said, deaf people can't go to college. Well, I said, yes, they can. And we have about 40% deaf teachers. And the deaf student said, deaf people can't teach. Okay? So they had lost their history. They didn't know about Claire. They didn't know about Monsieur. They didn't know about any deaf teachers. Now that's changing again in France. But this conference had a profound effect on deaf education around the world. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, I've listed 5 people's names. Dennison, you can see at the top of the slide. Okay, and I had pictures of 3. Dennison, E.M. Gallaudet, and Thomas Gallaudet, who is E.M. Gallaudet's brother. Dennison, the picture on the left, was the only deaf person at the conference. Okay, so these 5 people were representatives of Gallaudet College, and there was one British man hearing who voted against the resolution, voted for accepting sign language. So it's sad. When I went to Gallaudet in 1969, the education department at Gallaudet did not allow deaf students to train for elementary education. They would allow them to train for high school, but the only hearing people were allowed to train for elementary school education. This is at the world's only liberal arts college for the deaf. And most of the, I think all the teachers in the education department at Gallaudet were hearing, and most of them couldn't sign. Okay, that's changed now, but it was back in 1969. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay. Also in 1880, the numbers of deaf teachers are going down. Now it's gone down to 31%. And the establishment of the first National Association of the Deaf in the United States occurred. Why did deaf people in the United States establish NAD in 1880?
Rent is saying for access, for deaf
But
access.
why 1880? Why 1880?
I don't know. Ren said, I don't know.
What happened in 1880?
What was that? Ren's sign again?
He's saying the firing of deaf teachers, right?
Well, that was the fear of the deaf people, was that the Congress said you shouldn't use sign language. You should only teach speech and lip reading. So deaf people were afraid that sign language was going to be banned in the schools, forbidden in the schools. And they were afraid that deaf people wouldn't be allowed to teach. So the establishment of the National Association of the Deaf was a fight against the Congress in Milan. Deaf people were scared, and they had a right to be.
Ray is raising his hand.
Can you repeat that last statement?
Ray is raising his hand.
Sorry, a little interference.
Ray is raising his hand. One moment.
He's freezing, sorry.
Sorry, Yami saying, sorry, your screen turned black, Ray. We can't see your screen. We can't see Ray.
Yeah, it's black. Okay, I will message him.
Can you see me? Ray saying,
I can see Ray, but he froze up before.
okay, everyone's saying now we're good now. Go ahead, Ray.
My concern. It's freezing, sorry. Sir, bye. I cannot see.
Yep. I'm trying to get his whole idea. One moment. So basically, NAD established itself to go against what happened in Milan were they successful in advocating for sign language?
Yes and no. They slowed down oralism, but they didn't finish it. As you will see, oralism became more and more prevalent in the US. But at least deaf people organized themselves and they got some respect. And they lobbied for deaf rights. But as you will see, in the early 1880s, only 7% of deaf people were taught orally in the US. But by 1920, 80% of deaf people were taught orally, no sign language. Now, of course, deaf people use signs outside the classroom, but almost all the programs in the US did not allow sign language for many years. You know, we will see that as we go further. Okay. All right, let's go to the next slide.
And Peeves, trying to get Peeves' attention. Shaq is saying his screen is frozen as well. Okay, there we go.
Okay. So here's the first meeting of the National Association of the Deaf. All those people you see are deaf. Okay, so this happened in 1880 in Cleveland, Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio. Cincinnati. Okay. Okay, and let's go to the next slide. This is Robert McGregor, McGregor. He was the first president of the American National Association of the Deaf. He was deaf and had an MA degree. Okay. So later on, the National Association of the Deaf in the US was scared that sign language would be lost. So they did some filming in the early 1900s. This hasn't happened yet. Okay, let's see what the next slide is, and we may stop here. One more slide. Okay, we'll stop here and continue on Tuesday. We'll review about the two congresses in Milan and the effects on deaf education, not only in the US, but also in other countries. Okay, now, I don't know if I have this information correct or not, but the first Philippine School for the Deaf, I believe, was opened in 1907. Is that correct?
Yami saying yes.
Okay.
1907, correct.
Right, so that's the first school in Philippines. Okay, so second school in Vietnam and third school in China. We'll talk about that on Tuesday. So let's stop for now, and group 2 and group 3 will prepare to present on Tuesday. If you need a few minutes to review, we can give you that time. And then on Tuesday, we'll do group 2 and group 3. And then we will come back and review a little bit more on Tuesday about what we talked about today. Review a little bit more. Okay, any questions, any comments? Yami?
My internet is not working well. So I think best we have to review and do the question and answer.
Sorry, we'll have to review the tapes, and if we have any questions, we'll ask you on Tuesday.
Okay, okay, but we will review some of this because we went a little fast this afternoon. Okay, and before I forget, next week on Thursday, we
Sorry,
will
Marvin
have a
comment.
quiz. Yeah, we'll have a quiz.
So they're wondering for group 2 and group 3, where do we stop in terms of the information? Because I'm not sure if we're going to add in anything new. Do we just stop at slide 17 where it ends with Alice? Where do we stop in terms of the presentation for group 2 and group 3?
Yeah, I think you can make that decision in your group. So whatever the group decides. You want to go back to the beginning, or you want to go on from where group 1 stopped? It doesn't matter. You make your own decision, and whatever you're comfortable with is fine.
Marvin has another follow-up.
Yes.
We decided actually to what do you call this?
Divvy up to share the content equally amongst the group. So we'll just follow what we've agreed on before.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay.
Sorry.
Marvin saying thank you. So, sorry, Dr. Woody, you said on Thursday there's a quiz?
There'll be a quiz on, Thursday, about 15 to 20 questions based on slides 1, hold on a second. Let me. based on slides 1 to 12. Okay,
Okay, sounds good.
and
Raising
it will
thumbs
be,
up.
yeah, it will be multiple choice questions. So you have A, B, C, D, and you circled, I'm not sure how Teshi is going to do this, but we're going to try to do it online, where you can take the test online. I'll try to tell you more on Tuesday. If we don't know the exact way the test is going to be given, we can postpone it until later. But I want to try to do it while it's fresh in your mind on Thursday. Is Teshi here now?
Shak is saying, no, I don't think so. Yami saying
Okay,
no.
I thought I saw her name earlier, but I can't see the name now. Okay, so ask Teshi how she thinks the test will, how she wants to do the test. I think she'll talk with Christian about this. Okay.
Okay,
All
sir.
right.
We didn't do the share screen, so I can see everybody in one view. But now that we are using the share screen, so I could only see like 2, 3
Yes,
people.
yes.
Yeah,
That was
perhaps it's
one reason why I didn't want to use the shared screen,
Mhm.
because you know, you can't see everybody at one time. At least on my computer, I cannot.
Yeah. So